but I thought if I could get a property ahead of time within this area, then I can expect large appreciation. And of course, made sure that there would be cash flow at the very least once I rented it out. So I use sources like Zillow.
Text me and I'll text you back. Text me and I'll text you back. Text me then I'll text you back. You text me then I'll text you back. Text me then I'll text you back. TikTok, you don't stop. I will help you make your paper stack. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at now? 205-964-5243. You know. 205-964-5243. You know.
Hello, guys. This is Ty, aka the Flip Man, and today you hear me talk about numbers all the time, and we have an expert on how to really look at the numbers as far as analyzing data in particular markets to see if it's something you should pursue, whether it's wholesaling, whether it's flipping, whether you're trying to build a rental portfolio. The data is available if you know where and how to analyze it. So today we have an expert with us, Ariel out of Tampa, Florida. And I really appreciate her offering to share her time. I was doing some research, ran into her channel and just started watching video after video, reached out to her and she was happy to come on to share. Enough of me. How's it going?
Thanks, Ty, so much. Happy to be here. I have a passion for real estate, connecting it with data and tech. So super excited to be able to show that today with some land.
Okay, boom. So just to get into it, if you could give us a little background, I guess, before you may have gotten into real estate investing about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my background, I have about 7 years experience in data analytics space, mostly within the financial sector. So pretty big geek into Python, coding, things like that. But more so, as I was going through my daily routine of commuting in and out of the city, I realized, wow, like I cannot do this for the next 40 years of my life. So at that stage is when I really started to deep dive into investing. And since then, I've pursued my own strategies where I live in a property, live in it for 1 year, then I rent it out and just repeat that process so I could put a lower down payment and be able to acquire more properties.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. I think just from watching your videos, you were originally in that northeastern area, New York or somewhere like that.
Yeah, originally from New Jersey, but luckily was able to escape the cold. I made my way down to Tampa, Florida, where I reside now. And offline, I love to be able to go to the beach, hiking, outdoors. So it's right up my alley.
Okay, boom. All right. So with your background, how did you transition that into saying, hey, I can really use this to find markets to really invest in that are maybe quote unquote better than other markets? How did you somewhat fuse the two together?
Yeah, great question. So as I was trying to understand what markets to invest in, which have better cash flow, or looking at things like price to rent ratio, I realized that some of this data is just all over the place, right? So that's the challenge. And also the advantage that we have in real estate is that the data is not sometimes all the same per market. There's no full coverage. So as I realized this, I said, hey, while I go through this process, why not I document it on a YouTube channel where I could share with others how to find this data, some potential projects they could do within their markets to understand trends, if it's either going up, going down, or opportunities.
Oh, wow. Boom. Okay. So what was the first, if you could go back to your first property and after you've analyzed it, you decided to pull the trigger on it. What was that process like?
Yeah, so that was the first property that I lived in. So it was in South Amboy, New Jersey. And I did a full deep dive into thinking, all right, someone like me commuting in the city, I want to be close to train stations. So that was one of the things that I looked into was all the towns by train stations. And I looked at demographics, rent to own ratio, new development. So I saw South Amboy in particular was going to have a large boom as it's the city that's right by the water. So they were looking to import a new ferry, have new apartment complexes built, and this was all within like a 3-year plan. But I thought if I could get a property ahead of time within this area, then I can expect large appreciation. And of course, made sure that there would be cash flow at the very least once I rented it out. So I use sources like Zillow, a lot of like the mainstream sources, but also using some web scraping too to be able to pull news data across a large set of cities for me to focus in on which ones were having the most new development.
Okay. Whenever you use a term, now I know what it means, but just to explain, when you said you did some scraping, if you could explain what that means.
Yeah, of course. So web scraping, technical way I would say is pulling elements from web pages. But what that really is say if you're going to search for New York City new development, for example, you search that in Google, you get a web page, and you want to take certain information. Maybe you want to take the title of it, the description, some photos. Well, that all is manual process that could actually be automated by using web scraping, which is just either tools, a programming language, where you could get all those elements within just seconds. So at large scales, you could look at many cities and pull information by doing web scraping.
Okay, just one more thing on that. If someone wanted to do that and they have no technical knowledge of that, what's the easy, inexpensive way to get something scraped once you identify what data you're trying to collect?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of people from my channel do have technical expertise, but some don't. So one of the tricks and tips that I say is using Fiverr. So Fiverr is a great resource where you could find those all over the world who have skills in web scraping or other types of technical knowledge, and you can hire them for sometimes, $5 as the name, or as low as less than $100 to complete your tasks. But one of the biggest recommendations I give there is to either create a quick video, like using Loom, just to show what your process is manually, or take some screenshots, send it over, and that usually bridges the gap for them to understand what your need is.
I love Loom. Use it all day.
Yes.
Some of the students know this. I send them some, they ask a question, they'll get a Loom link back with me explaining, what, they need to do or whatever, or the answer. But I love Loom, Loom, Loom. You'll love it. All right. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and get into some actual data or whatever. Is it data or data?
It could be said either way. I say data, but
Okay.
maybe it's because I'm from the Northeast. Who knows?
All right, so we'll say data then. We'll use that today. All right. So if you'll share your screen, let's get into analyze some stuff in your process.
Perfect. So overall, I'm going to go through the process of if we want to get information, say on land data, how are we able to do that at scale? Because it's not going to be useful of our time to go in and out of these free web pages like Realtor to get this information. So I'm going to go into both high level of how to do this as well as a little more technical, and anyone would be able to pull some of these links that I have, especially the code, and run it themselves if they want to.
Okay.
So in this example, I'm going to go with Ybor City. For those of you that don't know, Ybor City is within Tampa. It kind of has a New Orleans Bourbon Street feel, but more palm trees. And a lot of investors over the last couple of years have been trying to acquire properties within the surrounding area. So this would be a good use case as to finding land to maybe develop on close to Ybor City.
Okay. All right.
So now we're on Zillow's page, and say there's a lot of land that's currently for sale. It's in Ybor City, and we have some information like the overview of how long it's been on Zillow, how many saves. There's information that goes deeper into what the frontage and depth of the lot is, which is all useful, but how do we actually get this in our hands?
Question before you go further.
Sure.
So it said Tampa, Florida there. So you're going to identify that particular area by the zip code normally?
So you could do it by city or by zip code.
Okay. All right. Because I know like sometimes, like if you're from a metro area, it's called, you say Ybor City?
Yeah.
but it may, well, anytime you see an address, it may say Tampa, even though it's that particular area within the market. I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah, so particularly within Tampa, the city, many zip codes, and the '05 zip code is for Ybor City.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right.
Awesome. So one of the ways we could get this data is by web scraping, so being able to pull the information, but to build our own web scraping tools is not really preferable. There are already people who they do this, and then they make this data easily available. And where they put this data is on a site called Rapid API. Think of it as a marketplace where you could just find all sorts of resources, information on flight data, city data, and more. So within this site, we have already these producers called API Maker. Not exactly sure where they're located, but they scrape Zillow on a real-time basis, and they provide that information for the public.
Wow. Okay.
So for example, without getting overly technical here, say if we wanted to search, they have a search where you could pull all information currently on the MLS. You could do it where you specify what the home type is. And in their example responses on the right, they show that once you make this request, is what they call it, you'd be able to get information, all the properties, which would include the price, what it's listed for, address, and even more information, which we'll touch on. But before I go into actually getting that data programmatically, any questions that I could help clear up?
Okay. So now, you see the, I guess some form of coding here to the right. And then in the middle is I see where you would add the URL, and do you perform the scrape here in the site, or do you download something onto your desktop or laptop to perform the scrape? So is it done web-based, or it is done through your device?
Great question. So it's done through device, but they do offer, like, say if I wanted to change some things here, like I want to look at Tampa, Florida, and say if I want to use Python, which is a popular programming language, I could basically just copy the code that they already have set up and then be able to run that on my own device.
Mac or Windows?
Either or. I'm going to show you in a second, but I personally use Google Colab, which means you don't need to have any Python installed on your notebook, or sorry, on your laptop.
Okay.
It's all hosted on a cloud.
Okay.
Just like when you use Google Sheets and things like that. So you don't need to have
Great.
anything installed.
Great. Okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. All right. All right. Great. All right. Let's go.
Cool. And just as a heads up, to use their service, they do provide a free basic where you could do 20 requests. So say if you want to get information on 20 different cities or 20 different select properties for free, you could do that, which is great for testing.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
So I'm going to jump right into it. We want to get land data for Ybor City and Tampa, and let's use this API to do so.
Okay. So, and what's this site for Google? What's the site called?
Yeah, this is Google Colab.
Collab.
And you just need a Google account. It's free. And what I'll be doing, Ty, is sending you over this exact URL,
Okay.
which would allow anyone who's watching the video to just go in, save a copy to their own drive, their own Google Drive, and they could run it.
Okay. All right.
And also, if someone isn't looking to do actually running the Python code, you could also hand this over to someone on Fiverr and show, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. So either or.
I got you. Okay.
Great. So what I do up front is there's some things that we need to be able to do to work with the data. So I just install some packages there. And in order to use any of the data within Rapid API, they request that you have a key, which is similar to like a password. So you want to keep that private to yourself. So in this case, I have my key stored on some file, and I go to retrieve that here. But if you're using this, you just put in your key and replace what I have here.
Okay.
So essentially the next part is we want to get all land addresses that are for sale in the Tampa area. So I copied over the code that was back over here. And I just changed a couple of things where my location is Tampa, Florida. I'm looking for lots and land. And let's just say I want to set the max price to 300,000. That way we're not getting a ton of land properties for sale.
Mm-hmm.
So I run that and it returns to me the same information that was over here, but it's hard to look at. It's just one long string, what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do next is I make that a little bit more readable by transforming that. But most people like me love seeing things in rows and columns. So I then take the data, put it into rows and columns. Now we could see that we have 26 different properties that are land for sale in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And all that information that we saw over here when we open this up is now in rows and columns in this table.
Okay.
So at this stage, if we wanted to just get a list of properties that are for sale, we could stop here, download it to Excel. But we want to get more in detail information. We want to see how long these properties have been, how many saves they've had, what the frontage and depth is of the property. So how do we look at that detail? Well, this source, they request that when you want to get more granular information, you need to have the ZPID, which what is a ZPID? Basically is it's Zillow's own identifier that they have for every single property in their database. So they just make a random number, assign it, and now that property, if you want to ever refer to it, has its own ID.
Okay.
So that ID is in this column here.
Okay.
So what we do is now we say, all right, I personally only want to get things that are Ybor City. So like you said, what is that zip code? It's 33605. So I filter on that. And just to sample things, because you should always sample before you do everything at once, I'm just going to look at 2 lots to see what that detailed data looks like. So I get the ZPIDs for those lots. And now I'm going to run it through this code that they have to get detailed information. So I run that now. And what we could see is for each of those lots, we have 253 columns. So we have a ton of data that came back.
Mm.
We have information on the agent. So if you want to be able to call the agent right away, it's on the lot, you can dive into that data there. We have information if you were looking for single family homes, for example, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, the rent estimate score, which would help with comping. We have the description and more. But in this case, both of me and you have spoken before this on what some data that would be useful to look at. So I just truncated all 250 columns to about 15 or so. And for these 2 addresses, which this first one is that example that I showed you before,
Mm-hmm.
we now can see the description, price history. So if the lot has gone, it's increased, decreased in price, the size of the lot, the dimensions, which it looks like when I was looking further into this, that the frontage is specified first, and then the length. And then we could see that this property has been on Zillow for about a day. 185 people have looked at it, and it's been favorited 8 times.
Mm.
Which lastly, before I pause, what's useful is being able to see this data in an Excel format. So if we look at this here, we now have that information that we just got all within Excel. And if we want to do more things with it, we'd be able to manipulate it here and not just in Google Colab.
And how did you download? I didn't see how you downloaded it.
Yeah, so it was just these 2 lines of code.
Uh-huh.
This is specific to Google Colab. So it asks us what's the file name that you want and the table that you want to output. And then this last piece here just downloads that file and now I have it in my hands.
Okay. All right.
Great. So the last piece that I want to cover here is you may not always want to get data for properties that are for sale. Sometimes there's off-market deals that you may want to get more information on. So how do you do that? Well, you could still get the detailed information, but remember, we need the ZPID for every single property. So how do we get that if it's not for sale? So as I was trying to think about this process, there was one in particular that had sold last year. I wanted to get the ZPID for it, and I see that it's in that URL at the top. So thinking about it a little bit further, I realized if we just do a Google search, put the address, Zillow home details, the first search is always going to be Zillow's link. So what I've developed is a function, what we call it, that replicates that Google search automatically and then pulls the ZPID. So this stuff right here, I basically get 2 off-market deals and excuse me, and then I run them through my Google search, and my Google search is able to get the ZPIDs for me, which I could then go now back to that API and get all that detail that we had before here. So this applies not only for on-market deals, but now for off-market deals too.
Okay. So are you just picking a random? Well, let me go back. Your definition of
Sure.
off market is not listed on MLS, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so you're saying the for sale by owner listings on Zillow?
Yeah. For example, for sale by owner, maybe you're doing driving for dollars. You see a property of land and address, and you want to get
Okay.
all this detail.
Okay.
That would be the process that you would take this last phase.
I got you. Okay. All right. Boom. All right. So once you have that data, now of course it's up to you on what you want to do with it as far as analyzing, I guess, interest, by the views and the number of days, how many saves. That could be very important on this evaluating the property and at the price that is being promoted at, and of course the size of it also in comparison.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you could kind of do an analysis on against the different properties, maybe see which ones rise to the top on whatever criteria you have. But as you saw here, I was able to pull all that information within seconds. And that's what the real power is of being able to leverage APIs. And then also, if you want to either do it yourself or use someone on Fiverr to develop some quick code so that you can either upload your own list or get a feed for all new properties that hit the market.
I got you. Okay. So and on your channel, you have demos of this and more. So you're going to send me the link here that is really already set up for this to use on Google Colab. What else can they expect to see? And once they go to your channel, first of all, give them your channel name. First of all, we didn't say that in the beginning.
Yeah, sure. My channel is Analytics Ariel. So Analytics, and then my name, Ariel. And the whole idea is to be able to bridge the gap between real estate and technology. So what you'll find there are tutorials like this that are more technical, but also some that aren't, and just more so showing you what types of graphs, charts, trends that you can analyze, and also a little bit more on my background on how I do the LTR strategy, live then rent, if you're interested in that as well.
Boom. And if they wanted to say, well, say, I don't know how to do this. And so they could show them this portion of the video to someone on Fiverr, and they'll know exactly what to do to try to simplify it for them. Or they'll just, I'm assuming, just knowing Fiverr, and I've used it for years, they'll do everything for you. It's just going to give you a fee and produce the data for you. You analyze it however you're going to analyze it. So just wanted to make sure people understood that whenever they don't have to actually know how to do this, because there are individuals out there to do this and do it quickly for you as
Right.
needed. So, wow. So, man, Ariel, really appreciate you sharing your time with us. again, you can find her on a YouTube channel. I think you may have a Fiverr listing also. That's how we initially communicated.
Yes.
So I'll include that link in the description here. Anything you want to add before we get out?
I just want to say that definitely, if you find yourself doing repeatable processes, try to leverage those on Fiverr as much as possible so that you can get to the more important things like actually closing deals. So super excited to be on this channel, Ty. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, no problem at all, guys. We got into some numbers, a different way of analyzing properties. And so I hope this was very helpful. I know it's helped me a great deal. As I always like to say, guys, we'll see you on the flip side.
Text me and I'll text you back. Text me and I'll text you back. Text me then I'll text you back. You text me then I'll text you back. Text me then I'll text you back. TikTok, you don't stop. I will help you make your paper stack. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at now? 205-964-5243. Now you know. 205-964-5243. Now you know.